Diane Abbott, almost from a moral point of view, she will never be as bad as Julius Malema, who's the ANC youth leader, who goes into the street, a government official calling for the continued genocide against the Boers in South Africa and the Afrikaners, when there's been 52,000 families in South Africa killed, 1 million people leaving South Africa, English South Africans, Boer South Africans and Khosa South Africans, because of the Zulu-dominated ANC Youth League, of which Julius Malema was the leader. He's now been removed by the ANC, but is it like the people who were burning poppies at the parades of British soldiers coming back from Afghanistan, like Muslim fundamentalists in this country? Is he just going to re-emerge under a different name, a different organisation? I mean, Julius Malema has said that he wanted to do a coup d'etat against Jacob Zuma, and this is where it's not that Europeans are overall always going to be on an individual basis more intelligent than Africans, sub-Saharan Africans, and of course there are many hundreds of different groups within in Africa, thousands, but Western Europeans' systematic use of empiricism and philosophy is going to tend towards selecting those individuals for success and reproductive success rather than those individuals who are irrational. And generally, the people who are irrational will end up falling foul of either public opinion, like Diane Abbott, because hypocrisy is a form of irrationality. Because why lie? Because only a fool lies consistently when all other avenues people are calling her out consistently that she's saying West Indian mothers love their children more than other races, and yet she's sending her own children to private school away from the very people who she says she's representing, to a predominantly English private school. And it doesn't make any sense, does it? I mean, to be called out consistently about lying and expenses and other things. That she's the thin end of the wedge. I'm not making a direct link between her and Julius Malema, but they are in the same sort of cloud of different ideas that link with Afrocentrism. For instance, you have people in Africa who, when shown a map of Africa, said to the geographer who was sending it, who was showing it, "You're childish. That doesn't exist." He couldn't get his head around the fact that he lived in Africa, yet as a continent, but yet he could get his head around the idea that the rival tribe had AK-47s. Where did AK-47s come from? Did they come from? They came out of Africa. He knew that. He knew that they shot, fire and whatever he thought it was, leopard's teeth or something out of the gun, right? And he knew that they were more powerful than the spears he was having. Some people are have been so parochial in their ideas that it is very difficult to get through to them. That wall of that level of culture. Yet in the Amazon rainforest, you've got people like Bruce Perry, who go and see a Amazon Indian tribe who've only been contacted 10 years ago, and he's standing there in Amazonian gear at a dance, and the girl next to him, who's about 25, is in the same sort of traditional garb. And when he gives her the Walkman, she recognises that he's playing Thriller. I mean, it's amazing, you know, the level of difference. You have other people, and there's been about at least 8 cases of this now. From my reading of different articles, it started to get the police's attention in the early 2000s, where children were being murdered and put in the Thames or anything. The recent case is of a woman who a woman who got her boyfriend to sacrifice her own younger brother because she thought he was a witch. These are people who are coming in from Africa with these ideas, and there's been no sort of assimilation process like in the United States, where they have to understand the US Constitution and they have to go through and have sort of some understanding of the Epicurean philosophy of the founding fathers of the United States. Right? It's a complete cultural disconnect. So on the one side you've got people doing basically voodoo killings, and on the other side you've got Western civilization that is doubling or quadrupling life expectancy, and on the verge of discovering the very origins of the universe or multiverse. You know, that's not to say that there's no cultural intellectual ability in Africa, but if you look at where it's come from either Western universities, where it's been imposed by the style of Western universities, which have been either imposed by force from the imperial era, or it's been adopted by those countries in conjunction with Western universities, or it's madrasas from the Islamic tradition, which has also been imposed by force. You know, when India and Arabia and Iran and Persia, were taking African slaves, and so were the Jewish and Semitic peoples along the coast, including Carthage and the Kushites, the Ethiopians. You know, and let's make the distinction: the Semitic people, the Jewish people, were from Africa. They were black themselves. It's not a question of culture. I'm talking about the sub-Saharan Bantu culture, which of course moved into South Africa after the Boers arrived in 1649, which means that the Boers, who are being exterminated and expelled from their own country, the country they built, have been there longer than the United States has been a state, a nation state, which of course happened in 1776, the Declaration of US Independence. You know, there's my question to Diane Abbott and Julius Malema is, apart from totalitarianism and a descent into primitivism, what can Afrocentricism give the world? As Amazing Atheist said about Marx, it's about feminism, you know, or I would say about Marxism. How can you explain the entire world's history and cultures and all the different racial moulding and separations as well, and different technologies growing by explaining the motives of one group in an egotistical fashion? You know, as a Westerner, I can learn a lot from Japanese codes of honour, or you know, how the Amazon Indians or the San Bushmen in Africa itself read the land and understand how to survive. Western rationalism is a borrowing culture that takes in ideas and adapts them to solve problems for every nation and people in the world, but with a Western empirical systematic way of doing things.